You are listening to the Level Up Your Gaming Podcast, episode 138, Building Encounters. In today's episode, we discuss building encounters in your game. We discuss the types of encounters and what to consider when building them. We dive into how to bring an encounter to life by looking at the environment around the encounter as well. If you'd like to participate in the discussion or leave us feedback, you can contact us at levelupyourgamingpodcast@gmail.com or find us on Facebook at facebook.com/levelupyourgaming. If you like the content and want to hear more of the show, subscribe and we'll ensure you don't miss an episode. New episodes come out almost every Wednesday. Also, please review, tell a friend about the podcast, or share with your gaming group. Now sit back and enjoy the episode. Welcome to the Level Up Your Gaming Podcast. My name is Aaron, and joining me virtually once again, I've got Josh. Josh, how you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. It's cold as anything outside, but trying to keep warm. How you doing?
I'm doing good. Holidays just wrapped up. We're recording this the day after Christmas, so hope everyone had good holidays, good Christmas, whatever you celebrate out there. Hope you had a good time. Anyways, today, Josh, you brought up a nice little topic for me on thankfully you have been building your own game, so you're actually able to think of topics that I am not able to think of right now.
Well, let's be fair, baby brain does work both ways here. You've got you got a new one there, so it does drain a little bit on you.
Yes. So I'm usually I think of all the topics for the episodes as I run through like my own game, but I've only played in a game once. And the game I was supposed to play in last week, right before Christmas, got canceled like the day before when I was asleep. So
yeah, that happened to me too. We were supposed to have a Tuesday session and just completely vanished last minute. Everybody was gone. It's fine. Holidays are holidays. Everybody needs, their time. But it has been helpful. I have been putting together this whole cyberpunk adventure. And, we talked about learning the new system. I've been working on developing the world. And really the next sort of thing I need to start populating, since I've got the story in place, is what sort of encounters I'm going to be putting into it. And I thought talking about how you and I build encounters might be something our listeners would like to hear.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we've talked about encounters before, and I see Josh put together this really nice document here. I'll probably end up blowing it up as we go around, because that's what I do. But the fun thing about encounters is that when you hear encounters, a lot of people think, fight, like, conflict with bad guys that's going to result in combat. And I think that is too simplistic. I think that when you start thinking about encounters, there's really three types of encounters that you end up getting. And that's the social encounter, the physical encounter, or the mental encounter. And so, we've talked about each one of those separately, but when you're building up a game, you have these three categories of encounters that sort of activate, and again, they are conflict-based events. These are where your dice rolls matter, okay, because they are stuff that, is integral to the story. If you don't defuse the bomb, it blows up, gets everyone. If you, don't solve the puzzle, the walls collapse upon you and you die. If you don't talk your way through this shopkeep to get the information, then he loses trust in you and you can't access the side quest. What be it, there is some sort of consequence on the other side of the encounter that lay there. So think about anything that you want to do beyond the players bickering with one another and doing their spreadsheets for accounting, or buying their gear. The encounters are what kind of glues your game, puts the friction together, and actually advances story.
And the results don't have to be as binary as you either win or lose. There can be tertiary events happening. You can have things where, yes, you're talking with the shopkeep to try and get into the back of the store. If you don't make it, the bad guy might get away, or you might not have this other encounter, or you might not be able to get to a thing. But also, if you take too long, it may be a different situation. Things may have changed, or if you've got a combat encounter, you may have something where you have X number of rounds to get this one thing done, or other event will happen. You don't even have to beat all the bad guys. And I think those are more interesting encounters where time is an element, or the way that you approach it changes the outcome, because that leads to more player agency in how the story progresses, rather than you either do it or you don't, and either we move to the next thing or we move to a different thing.
I mean, so yeah, you want to be able to have the what you want at the end of the encounter is to have some flexibility through the end of it. You're right. I shouldn't say they're so binary, yes, because you could have something where people get away from a combat, or you never do the thing that you need to do, so time passes and things happen as a result of that, or what have you. I think that's a good point in terms of designing a good encounter, is to think about the next, the ripple effects of what happens should you succeed, should you fail, should you partially succeed, should you partially fail. What happens next? Are the players invested in trying to now continue down this path to complete the encounter, or maybe even that sets up a new encounter, a whole new situation, a whole new story that you can have. So I think you've got them split up into two sections here of the story and random encounters that you've put together.
Yeah.
And
so when I think about setting up an encounter in the story, or in my world, you've got the ones that are part of the story. You've got, these are the events, these are the things you need to do. Here's the bad guys you need to fight. Here's the people you need to talk to. Here's the puzzles you need to solve to get from point A to point B. Get to the next chapter, get to the next part of the story, find the next event, get to the next site. But I love sprinkling in random events. Build out a table of things you can run into while you're looking for stuff, or things that can happen when you go into a shop, or, I'm looking for this thing, here's what happens. And having random events like that fleshes out the world. And also the players that I've DM'd for in the past, it gives them options to explore subquests that I may not even have built out. I've just when you create random events, you should have a in-world reason for them to happen. Like if they're running up against a couple of mobs, don't just have them walk down the street and have a bunch of guys fight you, because that doesn't make any sense. There's an event happening, like you're walking through a combat encounter, or there's a fight between the bakers and the butchers in the middle of the street, and the cops are standing back letting it happen because I'm not getting involved in that. Weird things happening, and you can get involved, or you don't have to get involved. And what happens in that can change the story, but doesn't have to. It is its own event. If the players like it, if the players want to investigate why these things are happening, you can then fill in more of that backstory and build it into your story, or build it as a sub story. And it fleshes out the world more in a way that allows your players to decide how their world is going to exist.
Yes, you bring up a great point there. I think in terms of cause and effect, nothing should be without what caused this to happen. Why are the bakers and the butchers fighting? It gets away from that sort of the dungeon crawling aspect, where it's like, why are all these harpies sitting in this room? Okay. like what happened here?
Who dragged these chests of gold down three?
Yes. Why is there always treasure at the end of the dungeon? It doesn't always make sense. So, having some reason for something to be happening does bring life into your world. It starts to color the world in the tone that you want to kind of present. So, maybe harpies like to hoard gold. Okay. I don't know. Okay. That,
Which leads to a fun, interesting thing like, why? Or
yes.
like, how would other people sort of exploit that? And then you can come up with this whole thing where, like, you've got one of the richest guys in town is actually breeding harpies to steal him gold, and now he's another bad guy, or something dumb.
You could do so many fun things with it. In a more recent game that Jared did, one of the bad guy was a vampire, um, and he was using this power called chemistry to kind of cloak everything in like a fake disguise, and was basically built a cult around it. And what ended up happening was we ended up he was also using animalism to control a bunch of animals. We ended up in a basement, and there were all these animals everywhere. And like that was just like his defense system. He had put all these like terrible, ravenous animals in there to protect him during the daytime. And so like we ran into like lions and bears, and it was like it was some rough stuff going on down there. But it made sense for kind of the villain and how he put together the dungeon, and it was basically a dungeon crawl with a bunch of animals in it.
Yeah, no, I get it. When we did the Waterdeep Dragon heist, I got in one of those tables of possible random encounters, and for some weird reason, over the course of 2 or 3 sessions, every random encounter they had was a merchant cart being attacked. They just kept running into that. Like they kept running into these merchant carts. So I added it. They wanted to find out what the hell's going on. It was a random encounter, and but it just kept happening. So they thought it was me saying it was a random encounter without it actually being one, and wanted to investigate. So I built up the sort of a team, like a company that would secure packages, and they were security forces that merchants could hire to help escort. And then there was actual merchants guilds that were moving things, and then they had there was a social event where they went to a dinner party and ran into the leaders of these different things who were bickering at the party, and they enjoyed playing with these characters, and eventually those became other characters in other parts of the story, and it sort of fleshed out how this world was made without having to be just knockout brawl fights all the time. It was a little bit of everything.
Again, that's taking a very simple encounter and then sort of expanding upon it and making it bigger. And I like that you chose the randomness and be able to make it part of your world based upon what your players decided to do. I think the random encounter is the one of the rules of thumb that we've always used in our games is don't go a couple of nights without throwing in a sprinkling of combat. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so the random encounter is great for that because it typically results in you have to fight these things on the highway, behind a tree, whatever it may be. So you end up with that's the beauty of the random encounter. But the nice thing is that you could roll out the random encounter ahead of time, know what they're going to end up fighting, and then be able to think about how do they organically sort of run into this encounter, and then how does it fit into the world. I like that idea of it.
Yeah. And that actually leads sort of into my second point here with these things. Yes, you can have story encounters. You want to make sure that they fit into your world and they take you from point A to point B. The random encounters make your world sort of flesh out, and they fill in those gaps. And like I said, and we've talked about, is that sometimes the way that your players think about what's happening is almost more important than what you have planned, because you can use their expectations to fill in some of those gaps and sort of build the next stages. So like, listen to your players. But one of the things that I was looking at also when I'm building out, like I said, I'm building this game, was how do you want to progress with any sort of tabletop game, you've got sort of a progression system. You level up, right?
Hmm.
How are you leveling up? Do you use XP or do you use milestone? Aaron, what's your choice?
Um, so I have played both, okay, in a D20 game, and I've played in White Wolf. It's kind of XP all around, but uh, here's the thing, okay? Experience is rough because it leads to people wanting to kill everything and then getting mad when they don't get the kill. Okay, because it's a competition to finish off, like the book that lays out what you get for killing stuff or doing actions in the game has a very set, you killed a goblin and the goblin's a weak enemy and so it's 50 XP. Okay, and if you don't divide that amongst your players and make it even, it's really easy for your players to stop working as a group and to start combating one another. I like the milestone thing, minus this one point that I'm going to bring up, because the milestone thing allows the players to work together towards goals. Okay, you don't have to just have it be, you must kill 30 goblins to become level 2. Okay, you must instead it's you have to do these tasks to become level 2. The problem is that because now it is a checklist of tasks, the players oftentimes do not engage in their own story anymore, and they just check off the checklist because they want to get to the next level. So
Yeah.
those are the two, like, good and bad of it. The XP side of it is the players might do more stuff to try to go earn more XP, and the milestone thing is the players might get tunnel vision in terms of what you want them to go do it. I think the best kind of compromise point in the middle of it is milestone XP, but you don't tell them what they need to do to achieve the next level.
Yeah. I've run both. And I found that XP, if you're doing it straight off of battle encounters, is worthless, and just it leads to a hack and slash game. And if you're into that, that's great. But like if you're trying to tell a story, it makes it difficult. Dungeon crawls, yeah, fine, do it that way. There's no reason not to. What I had done to make XP more useful was that, yeah, it's not for killing guys, it's for defeating them. And that doesn't necessarily mean killing them. And I would throw in, I have a baked in bonus if they did it in a unique way. So you get a bonus if you talk the bandits down. You'll get the points for defeating them, but you'll also, get a bonus for doing this other thing. And then you have to build an XP for, finding out this information or getting to this part of the story. And so you sort of combine the two. You've got milestones for the different activities, but it's in the form of a chunk of XP. The real difficult part in doing that is that if you want them to get to a certain level by a certain point, you sort of have to fudge the numbers and build in other encounters so that, they actually level up at the times that would fit within the story. So it's all XP sounds really great because you get people like really engaged and trying to find out how to get more XP, because, hey, this world's got a lot of things going on. Let's try and do something interesting. Let's go and try and talk to certain people. Let's come into battle encounters without the idea of let's just run in and hack and slash everything to death. It's okay, look around the environment, see how things work. Oh, there's something going on, and work from there. But building out a milestone thing is okay, I'm going to run into this. We've got a combat encounter. Let's finish it so we can get to the next thing. It works both ways. You really have to pay attention to how your players are interacting with it and sort of work from there. But once you've built into a set, you're sort of stuck with it. So
yeah, I again, trying to mesh the two of them is sort of rough. as well. And I like the idea of giving more XP based on like, basically having your own XP table in order to kind of give players experience as they go along. I just always feel like the nice thing about XP is that it's a tangible reward for doing something. And the problem with the milestones is that if your goal is to just keep your players at a certain level before the next part of the game, then, just why not just level them up when you're ready to level them up? I mean, just to say you've achieved the next level. It's super tough because the D&D systems particularly, which ends up using this, your player levels are such a tangible benefit as you go up in them, that you are constantly looking at how do I get to level 8? How do I get to level 10? Because those are the skills I really want to use. And talked about this before in terms of rewards in games, but if you're, and also maybe just kind of changing things up, if your players really want that skill, does it hurt you to let them take it earlier? Okay, depending on how it kind of works out in the game, or do you need to then have these milestones? And if the milestones aren't defined, do your players feel like, well, how the heck are we supposed to level up? How the heck are we supposed to go to the next place within the game itself? So again, XP stuff is really rough right now. And I'd say in the game that I'm running under Jared, XP is effectively pointless. It might as well be pointless, because at the end of each mini story, okay, it's basically like, okay, what skills did I learn that I want to add onto my character? And so you could do something similar in that regard, which is as you progress through challenges, a side story, things like that. Those are probably the best areas to award XP. If you finish the side story, you get this much XP. Everybody just gets it, okay? Or if you do this task, everybody gets it. So combat is no longer I have to kill the 50 goblins and I have to kick Steve down onto the ground because Steve's been killing more goblins than me and I need that XP to get to my next level. It's the group achieving different things awards you the XP to level up. And one of the nice things about RPGs in general is sort of that concept of kind of working your way into the overpowered. Okay, and so that's kind of what the XP side of things runs into is you don't want your players to be working into, I need to become overpowered, I need to get this skill, because all XP systems kind of move in that direction, which is I want to get this skill. So if you want to get the skill, session zero that up, talk to your GM about how do I get to that skill, or can we maybe modify it so I can get that skill earlier, can we work something out? Again, if you're brand new to tabletop, just choose one of the two systems and go with it. Don't try to don't try to go nuts and try to figure something crazy out. But it's a conundrum, because that's all it is that you're trying to achieve the next level for the characters to get those new skills, new hit points, all that stuff.
And we had talked about rewards. We had a very long discussion about what is a proper way to reward things, and that really is XP versus milestone. It is one of the rewards that's an option, but remember, go back to that, listen to that old podcast. There are other ways to reward your players and to keep it moving. So if you decide on one of them and it's not motivating your players the way you want, take a look and see what other types of rewards you can sort of bake into your system and use those as motivation tools as well, because players are playing this to have fun. We're running these things to enjoy it. It's not supposed to be a slog or a fight or a job. So do something to make it interesting and fun, and rewards are a great way to keep that going. So the next thing I had listed here is, what should the encounter be made of? And when I'm building an encounter, I know we talked about, story counters or random encounters. and how you're going to actually reward them for these encounters. But I like to think of, we talked about this with the random encounters. Why is it happening? Where is it happening? So I like to look at it as two separate things: the environment that the encounter is happening in, and then the actual people or creatures or whatever that's actually involved in it. And I like to start personally with the environment, um, because I think that where something is happening and what's around that is going to uh, sort of more flesh out the world than just you're in a beige box with a guy and he's mad at you. It's not interesting. It's weird. I mean, it could be interesting in itself, like you've got this fully fleshed out world and you walk into a beige box, but coming up with the environment that you're going to have an encounter in, whether it's a social or a puzzle or a big old combat encounter, knowing that, knowing what they're walking into, seeing the environment, sort of uh, builds a story before you even have to get into the actual encounter itself. And especially for combat encounters, you can add in things to the environment, but this also works for puzzles. This also works for social encounters. Um, when you read anything or look at anything about like building maps, if you're going to be building a combat map or a dungeon, something like that, you don't just draw a maze and call it a day. You sprinkle in things. There's rubble here, there's a fountain here, there's this room of bookshelves and all the books are burned, and having those things in there adds flavor to the environment that you're going to have these encounters in. But don't stop there. Have items that players can use for cover if they're going to sneak through, or if they're going to fight behind cover or distance stuff. Add in items that can be knocked over, or that early D&D story, the Lost Mines of Fendalver. They've got one of the first maps you get into. It's got a room you get into with some goblins you can see from a distance, and these giant pools of water. And if you knock over the water reserves, it floods out the goblins. So you've got an environmental way to deal with them without having to do a fight. So have a flood, have things that your players can light on fire, as a distraction or to flush enemies out because of the smoke, whatever, doesn't matter. Have things that the players can interact with that isn't just hack and slash, because it makes your environments more interesting. And one of the things that I've really enjoyed doing is, if you do have a larger fight, or if you're building up to a large fight, I wrote down siege weapons, but that's just the concept. It is an item that is within your environment that either you or the enemy can interact with, that changes the course of the fight. And it builds in sort of like a ticking clock that you can work towards to try and find out, like, how am I going to move this encounter? And it makes the fights more interesting. It gives you options for rewards because you figured it out, but you can also use it as a foreshadowing into that big bad evil guy encounter. Like, this is going to happen later. You need to know how this thing works and interact with it when you see it again later.
I think that adding to your environment is always crucial in terms of making something good, especially if you have a map. If you have a map and you're going to present your players with the map, you better have more on that map, because a lot of these maps have like pictures of fallen rubble and stuff. Know what the map means to you, and know what the different objects and different contours on the map should mean to you, especially if you use some like pre-generated map. Mm-hmm. Don't just say don't try to make it up on the fly and be like, oh, that's a box of boxes. Yeah, it seems bad, and then you don't know if you can use it for cover or not. You don't know if you can use it in the way that the player wants to use it. There's too much going on with a map that you haven't prepared, one, yourself, and then two, a map that you haven't studied if you have taken a pre-generated map. I think that's really important in terms of like again, fleshing out the scene and the scenario with you. Now, let's say you draw like a really simple map. Know what's in your environment, just in general, that you can describe to your players. This also goes if you want to stay away from maps and go theater of the mind. Explain the room to your players to some extent. And if your players ask, is there a chair that I can dive behind? Okay. Are you in a dining room? There's probably going to be a chair in that dining room. Yeah.
Yeah.
Make it
cool
work.
that stuff. If your players are looking for things to make the encounter more interesting, that's, you might want to give it to them, because it does mean that it's a more cool fight, it's a more interesting fight, and your players are interacting with your story and your environment. You want to encourage that. So
This doesn't just go to like fights as well. If you're trying to like do like investigate something, if your players are asking, is there this thing in the room? Okay. They might be wanting to know that because they believe that will produce a clue or make a connection for them that means something to them. So you can ask, you can say, well, sure. What exactly are you looking for? Try to work it out with your player, because they might be able to tell you what they're trying to connect the dots on here. And then you'd be like, oh yes, no, that is there in the room. Okay. Because if you just say it's there and they go like, aha, I've connected the dots, it doesn't mean anything at that point as well. You need to kind of get to what your player's trying to work out in their head. You need to have them vocalize it to you. Not to say that it wouldn't be there should it not be there, but if your player's looking for something really specific, like I remember one time I was looking for like invoices to try to understand like this person's connections, and like, has this person been doing something like recent, and trying to connect with, like, was it one of these people who maybe killed this guy? And I remember Jared was trying to like kind of piece it together, and I just explained to him what I was trying to figure out there. The important thing was, yes, he was able to provide me invoices. The other thing that was also really important is he was able to provide me information that said these don't effectively connect to what you wanted to connect the dots to. So you don't want to provide something that your player is looking for that leads them down a rabbit hole that turns them around in the other direction as well.
Red herrings are fun, but they are a distraction to the story. If you're going to go into that route,
you provide the red herring.
You provide the red herring. Don't let your players
find red herrings that don't exist, and you suddenly gave them red herrings, and now they've lost track of everything that they're doing.
Oh yeah. Or if that does happen, stop it being a red herring. Like, if you're going to look through the inventory to try and find a connection to arms dealers, and your player is all about this, and you're like, oh, I didn't have anything about that. Yeah, of course you find some inventories. There are a bunch of things for food services and haberdasheries. In fact, there's a lot of hats being bought by this place. Just a ton of hats. And you're just making stuff up. You're, yes-anding. But when your players then are like, well, shit, we got to figure out what's going on at the haberdashery. Well, now the haberdashery is a front for an arms dealer, and that's just what you've written. You did that as a yes and now that's part of your story. So,
get ready to move things around if you lead your player wildly astray, and now they think that everything is wrong in the haberdashery. So you just
what I'm saying is, and I think I've made myself clear over these various podcasts, is that haberdasheries are dangerous, and you need to watch out for them.
And you stay away. But no, I think it makes sense to make sure that everything kind of fits into its place. Rule of cool goes to a certain extent. If your player's like, well, where's that M60 that was sitting in the corner? Like, no, it's not there. Okay. But if that player's like, are the drapes torn down? Okay, I'm going to toss that up upon the person and duck out of the room, or certainly there's a fire extinguisher underneath the sink, because people have those, and yes, there is. Boom, I shoot that in the guy's face. Like, yeah, there's all sorts of things that you can do that kind of work out. You can your player wants to improv a weapon, your player wants to do something kind of cool. It kind of borders into the rule of cool, but also like what is actually in that room.
Yeah. So when you're creating and this is like I said, like we said, it's not just for combat encounters. This could be a social encounter too. You've got that shopkeep that you're trying to work your way through. Describe the room. Maybe he's got a bunch of you know, they're not valuable, but they're his favorite knickknacks that are up in the shelf, and one of your guys could start intimidating him by breaking them, or something like that. So you've got sort of an environment that they're in,
Or he has a
without
collection of
having to.
bottle caps, and you're like, I also collect bottle caps. I've seen that one before. Like,
You start trading with them, build a rapport.
yes, so there's all sorts of ways that you can do that. So it's good to be able to have context clues in an environment that help you understand the person that you're dealing with, or what can you interact with to make that person, to defeat the encounter. That's the whole point of it.
But the environment is only one half. The other half, and this is going to be it for my stuff when I'm talking about this, is the actual people that are in the environment. So you've got an environment. You've decided what's in the environment. You've decided all the little knickknacks or pieces or things that you can work with. But why are the guys in the place in the first place? If you're wandering through a rickety old manor trying to do this thing, why are there, whatever you're fighting or whatever you're working against, why are they even in there in the first place? What's their goal? What are they trying to do? Are they just there to slow you down? In which case, they really don't have a lot of stakes, so they're going to bolt the first sign they see they're going to lose. How are they trying to accomplish this goal? Do they have tools, or are they, just building barricades, or are they trying to make a buck? Try and figure out what their goals are, because this can lead to better encounters, not just slash and hack and slash. It can lead to social encounters where a battle it once was. It can lead to a battle where it was just a social encounter. These things are interesting. And I know we talked about this before about, named NPCs. They don't have to be the big bad evil guy. You can pepper in some bad guys that are frequent visitors to your party without having them, they don't kill them every time. They don't kill them. They escape. They come back. You keep encountering the same guy. They learn from their mistakes. They come back with new tactics and information. And I think that leads to a more nuanced story and more interesting encounters, because you've got sort of this buildup, and your players have interacted with the world, and your world is growing because of them.
Yeah, again, KYP, know your players there, because your player might defeat your named NPC. So
it happens.
It happens, and just be aware of that. I think it does make, again, the key with the mobs, the key with anybody who you're going to encounter anywhere is, do they have a reason to be where they are? And, does it make sense? Just do they fit in with your story as a whole? You don't want to, like you said, if you're going to go check out something and you run into that abandoned manor and there's other people there, it's like, well, why are they here? You don't have a reason, then it doesn't make any sense. And it's just like, well, so you're just putting bad guys in front of me to put bad guys in front of me. Okay. Could you negotiate with someone? Maybe they're there to, plunder things from this abandoned place, but they're not necessarily looking for the same item you are. So let's strike an accord. Let's, work together. I'll find you something valuable. You find me what I'm looking for. Okay. There's all sorts of ways that you can barter and trade. Maybe they already found it. Do you want to then you've got the option of going through a physical encounter? Do your players just want to beat heads and steal it? Or do your players want to, try and negotiate and get it for them? Or do your players want to work together and go into the Tomb of the Mummy? I don't know. I wouldn't work with a group of bandits, but, maybe your players are run on the risky side, and so they're going to go for it and trust these guys. Yeah, that guy's got a good smile. I like the cut of his jib, and we're going to go work together. And then you get to betray your players.
And instantly you've created a more interesting run than just like, there's bandits, beat them up, go to the next room. Now you've got a team of bandits you're working with that are going to betray you at any moment. but they've got skills that your players may not. And
So
it's interesting. It's a more dynamic environment. It's a more interesting story, and your players are going to have more fun.
it makes for
So
a lot of really fun tension. I've had situations like that before where you're like, I shouldn't trust this guy, but I'm going to.
because it's more interesting. Yeah, no, I'm all about that. So, like I said, I'm building up this game. I'm trying to pepper it with story beats, encounters that are going to happen to make the story. I want to throw in some random stuff just to fill it in, make it look interesting. But if I'm going to do it, I need to decide on how I'm going to reward my players. I need to know what environments that the encounters are going to happen in, and what is the motivation, what is the reason for those encounters to happen in the first place. And by building that out, I'm planning on making a more interesting and dynamic world that the players can sort of uh, evolve by them just interacting with it. And I think that's the more interesting way to do this.
I agree. Again, I think that it makes total sense to see how your players work. And again, it could change encounters that you had planned down the line. I mean, you could change, you could create entirely new encounters based upon how your players handle random encounters, because maybe
Mm-hmm.
you end up with long lasting NPCs out of that. Lots of great ways to expand upon your game through encounters. So if you, well, I'll ask you, Josh, do you have anything else you want to add?
No, I've gone through plenty here today.
So if you've got any advice on doing encounters, I know we've talked encounters before in the past. Maybe how you start building encounters into a new game and deciding your encounters. Let us know. levelupyourgamingpodcast@gmail.com or facebook.com/levelupyourgaming. Also, the podcast is on YouTube. I updated all the episodes. Yay! So you can find us there. Smash the like button. You just got 5 episodes dropped if you listen to us on YouTube. And we go ahead and review the podcast, subscribe, recommend to a friend, all those good things. But that's going to wrap us up for the week. So for Josh, I'm Aaron. Have a great week, everyone.
Bye.